I'm Giovanna Sardelli. I am Artistic Associate and Director of New Works for TheaterWorks Silicon Valley. And I want to begin by acknowledging that TheaterWorks offices and theaters are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. And I want to thank you for tuning in to the conversation with playwrights Betty Shamieh and Kareem Fahmy. And for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give a brief introduction. So Kareem is a fantastic director and playwright, and he is just finishing his one-year term as a 2020 TCG Rising Leader of Color, and he is the playwright of A Distinct Society. And Betty was born and raised in the Bay Area, and she is a stunning and prolific playwright, named a UNESCO Young Artist for Intercultural Dialogue and a Guggenheim Fellow in Creative Arts. Betty wrote As Soon as Impossible. And we're just so lucky to have you both as part of our New Works Festival online. We don't have that moment where, you get to watch people in the green room mingle and find out who's meeting and who's reconnecting. And so I just wanted to ask if the two of you have worked together before, if you know each other.
Well, I knew of Kareem. I was working on a project with the Royal Court, and they said, we want to bring these Arab playwrights to New York. And they said, do you know any, Arab? I had been working on a project with the Royal Court at the time, and they said, do you know any directors? And I had to actually look, and that was sad and embarrassing to me, because when I got out of drama school, I got out like 10 minutes before 9/11, and I did a show called Chocolate and Heat, Growing Up Arab in America. Like, it was really hard to find anybody from that community who was identifying that way. And so I did this show called Chocolate and Heat, Growing Up Arab in America, and then 3 weeks later, 9/11 happened. And so we were all set to extend. And, so at the time, I was very visible as an Arab American, right? At the time where what that meant change, kind of. So I got a lot of people from, New York and internationally saying, where are the Arab directors? And I was really, really happy because I was able to direct them towards Robert O'Hara and Kareem. Mm. And it really was very satisfying to me that I had this opportunity to connect someone from that culture with the Royal Court and make that kind of connection, because that hadn't been possible for me in drama school in my early years in New York. So that's how I found him.
A long time ago. I mean, yeah, I moved to New York in 2003. So it was, and at the time, it was a very different time in terms of the community, the Arab American community being really starting to come together and really starting to say, like, how do we harness our stories and tell our stories? And I really got pulled in. I mean, Betty was one of the first people, Maha Shahlawi as well, was one of these people who said, oh, you're, an Arab director, and now you're based here in New York, like, come and work with our community, help us tell and shape our stories. So, I got to work on that project with the Royal Court and Penn World Voices, which was amazing, and many other things, since then.
You're both such incredible advocates for the artists within your community and your activists. And I've always admired that about both of you, because Betty, when I met you, you seem to come with a roster of names and artists that you are always saying, you should know this person, support this person. And same with you, Kareem. I think it's how I get to know some of the most talented people in my orbit, is from people like you. So thank you for that.
And thank you, Gio, for being so, one of the early people who were looking for those voices. And I really felt that, because I did know you at that time in New York. And I always felt that you were open and looking for ways to connect and make stories happen. So that was, and it's nice to be back kind of reunited with you in this way. So
it's so funny. I've been for years trying to work with you. And so when your play was, this particular play was put on my radar by Samer Al-Sabr, who's directing your play and who we've had a partnership with we've been collaborating with Stanford University's Department of Theater and Performance Studies and the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity this year. And so when Summer brought me your play, I can't tell you how happy I was, because we had committed to Kareem's play. A Distinct Society was supposed to be part of the New Works Festival that would have happened in person in 2020.
Oh, no.
Well, we all know what happened. And so now, but in this stunning way where sometimes I think whoever's looking over the magic of theater orchestrated this moment, because this is fascinating to me that we have your plays in conversation with one another. And for people who don't know, I would love, Kareem, we'll start with you. If you can just tell us a teeny bit about your play and maybe the genesis of the story.
Yeah. Well, my play, it's called A Distinct Society. And Gio is going to be directing the workshop, which I'm very happy about. It's based on real events. I grew up in the southeastern part of the province of Quebec, close to the Vermont border, and I read an article a few years back about this library, which is a real place. It's called the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, which is a building that sits over the border of Quebec and Vermont. So it's, partly in the US and partly in Canada. So it's this sort of liminal space between these two countries. And the amazing thing that was happening there, thankfully these days are now behind us, but when the Muslim ban was in effect, families that were being separated by the ban, so mostly people in the US who could not leave the country, otherwise they wouldn't be able to return, and then their families who were in other countries who couldn't come into the country to see their loved ones, were finding that they could come to the library to use it as a meeting place. And so because these real events were happening literally 30 minutes from my hometown, and my family I come from a Muslim Middle Eastern background, the story resonated with me for a lot of levels, and I ended up writing this play.
Wow. I just can't believe that how fortuitous that is, but also that there is a place that is a library, a safe haven, and an opera house.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. And Betty, please, can you tell us about your play?
Well, I don't like to repeat myself as an artist, and I write really funny plays. Nobody gives me credit for it, just like I write really feminist plays. I mean, The Black-Eyed was one of the only plays, I think, Carol Churchill and some of the Greeks have all-female casts off Broadway. Black-Eyed was, one of the very few plays in our lifetime that was all-female that made it to that level. And I never kind of get any sort of recognition because it's seen as an Arab play. So I'm a really funny feminist. And because I also happen to have this other ethnic identity, that becomes the dominant thing that I am. So, so I did this really kind of heavy tragic comedy, Black-Eyed. And I was like, you know what? I'm feeling like, I've lived through 2 Gulf Wars, 9/11, and what it meant to be Arab American changed during that period. And then the Muslim ban happened. And what's so crazy to me about the Muslim ban is like, you can't be like really good friends with Saudi Arabia and have a Muslim ban in your mind. Do you know what I mean? Like going on. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like the craziness of that whole system was crazy to me. Do you know what I mean? Where most of, if you want to keep it real, the hijackers from 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia. So you're going to like ban Syrians. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it just doesn't even make like logical sense that was put in place. But right after 9/11, I went with, right after The Black-Eyed, I went with a group of artists to Russia with New York Theater Workshop, and they did these amazing trips. And I hope they continue to do them, but they're basically artistic exchanges. So I went and saw all this like really maudlin Russian theater, and I was like, in Russian, and half the people were like, we don't want to see anymore, we don't understand. But I just love to see like the dour faces, like, do you know what I mean, like doing. And I asked these Russian artists, I was like, who is the most translated American playwright? And I was thinking O'Neill or Tennessee Williams' darker works. And they're like, Neil Simon. And I was like, what? And I said, why Neil Simon? And they're like, because in Russia we like to laugh, looking like they had never laughed in their life, you know? And what I realized, Neil Simon is about, you know, not having enough money and being, you know, honeymooners in a small space, or like, you know, being a divorcee and being stuck together with this other divorcee, like The Odd Couple. It's about those like elemental things about space. And that's always very interesting to me, you know, as somebody who was a New Yorker for a long time. Uh, and you know, when you go to Moscow, it's kind of got that New York feel of not enough space. And so I got really excited. I read all of Neil Simon, and I came up with this play. And I said, you know what? Nobody thinks I'm funny. I'm super funny. You know, like, I'm going to write a straight up hardcore comedy, and it's going to be, you know, and it's going to have all those themes that, you know, fascinate me, like how racist really are we, you know, and if you, and on both sides, you know what I mean? So it's the story of these two lovely old men. One's an old Iraqi American professor of comparative literature, and the other guy's like this mega multimillionaire, and he's a contractor who never went to college. And they're both widowers, and they end up going fishing together because they're kind of like, you know, co-spousing each other. They become like in that kind of odd couple way. And Ramsey, the Arab American's granddaughter, is on the run because I have crazy women in my family, and one of them, their boyfriend cheated on them, and they threatened to call the FBI on them and say that they were terrorists. It's kind of family I come from. Anyway, so I thought, how amazing, how much power. So she calls the FBI on her boyfriend when he cheats on her. So she shows up at this, like, you know, lovely fishing place where these two men who are widowers, like, you know, connect from these two different worlds. When she's on the run. And when they start planning Arthur the Wasp's birthday party, he starts to get suspicious. He starts to think, what the hell? They're getting equipment, they're hiding things. And it's really about friendship and growing old and being born in the wrong family, because it's about how Arthur can appreciate Layla in ways that her own grandfather can't. So it's all these themes that are very important to me in a comedic setting that I'm very excited about presenting, especially in the Bay Area, because this is based on Lake Berryessa, a resort that I used to go to with my family, and kind of seeing those older men kind of connect and be unmoored when they don't have their spouses anymore, and wanting to also honor the fact that, like, in the theater, you'd go to the theater and there'd be like really, really old people who, you know, were retired and this was what they did, and young people making theater. There was that. So it's a story about that missing in between generation and how the young people can connect with older people, based on Neil Simon and the craziness that was Russian dour theater. So that's it in a very big nutshell.
You know, you both feature young people in your plays. You have characters, and I wonder if you can talk about that, if there that desire to have these issues, because they're viewed very differently depending on what generation you're from.
I can speak to that because it's, you know, so much of what I was trying to explore in the play is like how we develop our relationships to politics and the world around us as we grow older. So, you know, in my play, there's a teenage character, and then there are various characters in between, and then there's an older person who's, you know, in his 50s, like a dad of a grown woman, of a grown young woman. And like, I think back, and I'm somewhere in between those two ends of that spectrum myself, but, you know, my journey has been a big one. Like, you know, growing up in a smallish community in southern Quebec, it's like I didn't have a huge sense of the world around me. And there are these lessons that one learns as you age about sort of like what space you take up politically, what power you have politically or not. And that also really transformed for me coming from Canada to the US, where like the system around me was different and viewed me differently. So I've always been really interested when I am dealing with those sort of themes of like who we are in the world as individuals in this sort of larger political system, that's something that really changes a lot throughout one's lifespan, you know? And so like there's this line in A Distinct Society, which this father character, Peyman, says about politics being four-letter word, SHIT. And that's something that my you know, in case this is a PG-rated Zoom call, but you know, that's something that my father actually said to me, you know, and like for my father's generation, the idea of being an immigrant who wants to stay out of politics and sort of say that's not my thing, that's not my problem, was something I was really interested in exploring, because so many of the younger people in my life are very politically active and very politically aware. So I always think those conflicts, intergenerational conflicts and interracial conflicts, make for good story, make for good drama. They work in a play.
Yeah. They also make for good comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, one of the lines in the new draft of my play is the girl's like, how am I going to get a boyfriend? There's a Muslim ban. Like, they're like totally taking out my dating pool, you know, like it's that logistical thing, like of like, this is so crazy that, you know, that you, but like, it doesn't make sense because you're not even banning all the Muslims. And most of those Muslim countries are predominantly Muslims. So there's a lot of Christians and Zoroastrians and you know what I mean? So it's like, to me, you know, the level of absurdity with it is, but it's very, you know, like to Kareem's play and to his point, it's very real. I had a friend who could not see her family from Iran, you know, and that would piss me off immeasurably, especially if you have grandparents and people who are not going to, you know, be able to wait to the next election, possibly, you know, which was her case. So in terms of being able to see her grandmother as much before she passed, I mean, these are real things. But for me, the absolute absurdity is what I was trying to get at, you know, and because, you know, what I like to say to people is, you know, I grew up being afraid of the Russians. I went to a like Catholic school where like we still did drills where we put our heads under desks and like, you know, hid from the Russians that were coming. And then within my relatively short lifetime, I grew up knowing that kids probably in my neighborhood were afraid of Arabs and had nightmares the way that I had about Russians. And, you know, so I have enough like years on me that I feel like, you know, next is going to be China or maybe Russia again. Or, do you know what I mean? But like creating an enemy in a multicultural society is absurd.
I think what I love about both of your plays, at the core of them, you've got these incredible human beings, and we watch them be corrupted by a corrupted system in some way. How do you navigate something if you're being told by your government, consider these people dangerous and bad? And you know, your comedic approach to it highlights the absurdity, and then Kareem, your play, which is not without its own humor, also highlights the cost as everyone is trying to navigate and how we stop seeing the people in front of us. It's true in both of your plays. I mean, Betty, in yours, you have dear friends who suddenly distrust years of friendship and think, have I been looking correctly? I saw you as a person, right. But now, and so I just think, I think I love that these two plays offer a breadth of examining something that's happening in our country right now to so many segments of our society. And so I'm grateful to both of you for being part of our festival, for sharing your stories. A comedy on Zoom is to me one of the bravest things ever, because I crack jokes and then they go out in the void and I just go, yeah, and trust that. So I cannot wait to start. And I just want to thank you both. And I'm going to give us some details so that people know to tune in and see your work. You can see Betty Shamieh's play As Soon as Impossible on Saturday, May 1st, and Kareem Fahmy's play A Distinct Society the following Saturday on May 8th. And then we're going to close out our festival with Lisa Ramirez's one-woman show, Pas de Deux, Lost My Shoe, on May 15th. When I say those titles, I get so excited about the work we're presenting and the artists we have as part of this festival. So please join us. We have a pay what you can festival pass. Go to our website, check out the information, learn more about these artists and more about the plays, and we hope to see you online. Thank you so much.